Why does every Manchester United manager fail? Well, the answer is simple, they don't, at least not in the way that is often presented by pundits, fans and former players. Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer and Ten Hag, none of them were complete failures and they all had their own successes. They each delivered progress, from Champions League returns to domestic cups and even second place finishes. So the real issue isn't that they fail outright, it's that United's hierarchy never acts early enough. They never upgrade when the cracks appear, they only intervene once the entire structure has collapsed. Clubs like Chelsea under Roman Abramovich or Real Madrid under Florentino Perez were masters of applying the opposite principle. They were ruthless in discarding managers at the right moment in order to keep a competitive cycle alive. United, by contrast, cling to the illusion of patience and stability, and the irony behind it all is that this very patience is what's keeping us in this cycle. So the better question becomes, why do United insist on waiting until the boat has completely sank before making the necessary changes, rather than when the holes first appear? Well, in order to find the answer, we must first break this question down into 3 sub-questions. Firstly, what does failure actually mean in the context of United's managers post-Ferguson? Secondly, why have clubs like Chelsea and Real Madrid been able to thrive in supposed instability whilst United are sinking in patience? And thirdly, what would a ruthless, results-first United actually look like in practice? Well, before I break all of that down, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different currencies and retro jerseys, including the new Manchester United shirts for this season. They sent me over this home shirt with Bruno Fernandes on the back, this 06-07 white Manchester United away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, as well as this Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave a link in the description and in the comment section below. So on paper, every United manager who has been sacked, barring maybe David Moyes, post Sir Alex Ferguson, has succeeded to some degree. Van Gaal inherited a 7th place team which was out of Europe for the first time in a while and restored Champions League football with a 4th place finish within his first season. Jose Mourinho won 2 trophies in his first season, including a Europa League title, and took United to 2nd place, behind only Pep's Centurion Manchester City. Ole brought back belief after the chaos that Mourinho had left, being excellent as an interim manager, finishing 3rd in his first season, 2nd in his second season, and would have also won a Europa League title had a penalty shootout gone the other way, and that was with a squad that was never going to be able to compete with Pep's Manchester City or even Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. Ten Hag ended a 6-year trophy drought and also secured a 3rd place finish within his first season, and so there's no way that you can claim that any of these 3 were outright failures. The problem is the narrative. See, at United, the success of each individual manager is defined against Ferguson's dynastic dominance, as well as the success of 2 generational managers in Klopp and Guardiola with our 2 biggest rivals. Unless you win the Premier League or challenge consistently for the Champions League title, you're cast off as a complete failure, but this is just lazy. Each manager provided stepping stones. The real collapse comes not from their inability, but from United's refusal to act once progress stalled. And so we need to establish by first principles, what is the actual objective of a manager at Manchester United? Well, it should be to sustain trajectory towards a league title. But what are the constraints? Well, of course it's going to be the squad quality, as well as the quality of our rivals, but it also seems to be a fan base which is still anchored in Ferguson's shadow. But what's the trade-off? Well, you either replace managers when their trajectory has peaked, stagnated, or is beginning to decline, or if not, you don't just risk further stagnation, you risk complete collapse. United always choose the latter, and so the outcome becomes almost inevitable and the cycle continues. This is in contrast to the ruthless models of Chelsea and Real Madrid, which completely exposes the myth of patience. Abramovich was quick to sack managers without hesitation, almost as soon as he got the gut feeling that they weren't the ideal manager to take the club forward. Andre Villas-Boas was brought in as a supposed project manager, yet he was sacked at the start of March of his first season. And whilst Chelsea were underperforming in comparison to Ancelotti the season before, you have to say it was harsh, as if he was at United he probably would have got until the end of the season, but Abramovich got it spot on, as at the end of the season Chelsea were lifting the Champions League title with Roberto Di Matteo. Lampard guided them to a Champions League campaign in his first full season after having lost Eden Hazard and also having to rely on youth players who had previously been out on loan, with Chelsea experiencing a transfer ban that season. But when Chelsea began to stagnate the following season, Abramovich saw his ceiling. Tuchel arrived mid-season, and just like with Chelsea's previous Champions League success, by the end of that season, Tuchel had taken Chelsea to the Champions League title. Ruthless, definitely. Harsh, maybe. Successful, absolutely. Real Madrid under Perez were no different. Pellegrini earned 96 points in La Liga, finishing second behind Pep's Barcelona, a points tally that would have won the league in nearly any other season. Still, Florentino Perez discarded him, and not necessarily because second place wasn't good enough, but because he saw higher potential with Jose Mourinho, who ended up breaking Barcelona's dominance with a 100-point title and took Real Madrid to 3 straight Champions League finals, their first since 2003. Contrast this with Manchester United over the same period. David Moyes lasted all the way until March, until it was clear that United couldn't get Champions League football, despite them being out of the title race by Christmas. Van Gaal limped on even as his football regressed, where he did win an FA Cup, but 5th place wasn't good enough and he ended up getting sacked anyway. And even after Mourinho's 2nd place finish in 2018, the signs were there that collapse was on the horizon. But United had waited until the poison had set in, and even the season after took until December to make the call to sack Mourinho. Whilst Ole had done well to turn United's fortunes around, it was clear long before he was actually sacked that his ceiling with this team had been hit and stagnation was turning into decline. United like to call this indecisiveness maturity, but in reality it's just paralysis when it comes to making ruthless decisions. Chelsea and Madrid's ruthlessness has produced trophies, but United's patience time after time has produced nothing but decline. See, the issue is that the United board, former players and large parts of the fan base remain trapped in the myth of finding the next Ferguson. They believe managers need years to build dynasties, pointing to managers like Klopp, Pep and even Arteta, failing to recognise that those managers are statistical outliers, products of unique conditions and also their own individual ability, which can't be simply applied to any United manager just because they've had some previous success. Modern football rewards continuous optimization, not these idealistic long-term projects which seem to take at least 1 or 2 seasons just to get off the ground and end up never getting completed. So what would this ruthlessness look like? Well, it's not chaos, it's recognising when the ceiling has been reached and acting before collapse. Abramovich understood that Lampard was a necessary stepping stone, but not the final solution. Perez knew Pellegrini wasn't the man to dominate and overthrow Pep's Barcelona. United, by contrast, doubled down on expired managers who are beginning to decline, hoping for miracle turnarounds. If United had had the same approach as Perez and Abramovich, things could have been very different in the decade after Ferguson. Van Gaal would have been replaced midway through the 2015-16 season after stagnation, instead of at the end of the season. David Moyes should have been sacked around November or December, which potentially could have allowed United to recover a top 4 position, or even go on a deeper Champions League run. Mourinho should have been replaced in the summer of 2018, or even within the first few months of the season. Ole should have been upgraded with either Zidane or Ancelotti. After finishing second and losing the Europa League on penalties, his objective should have been to bridge the gap between the chaos that Mourinho left and the Ronaldo return in 2021, not overseeing the 21-22 season, which he was sacked halfway through anyway. In each of these cases, not acting quick enough disrupted any momentum that we had previously built, instead forcing us into a complete rebuild when all we really needed was an upgrade. When judging whether to keep or sack a manager, you need to ask yourself, is he capable of winning the league? If the answer is no, then you have to ask, is he capable of fulfilling the objectives this season, being a Lampard or Pellegrini-like stepping stone to then allow us to upgrade and achieve the main objective of winning the title? If the answer is no to the first question, then you need to ask, is there a manager who's available on the market or who we could get from another club who is that man? And if the answer to the second question is no or maybe, then there's really no point keeping that manager at all. Chelsea and Real Madrid have been highly successful operating in this way, whilst United have refused to, and that indecisiveness, which is labelled as patience, eventually just turns into a permanent purgatory of stagnation and decline. That is the cycle that United are in, not a cycle of sacking managers too early, but sacking managers too late.